everybody. Thanks very much for tuning into Fully Booked today. Today we have with us Cat Hogan, who's a really well-known local writer, writer of 2 psychological thrillers. Would that be fair to say, Cat?
That would be fair to say, Imelda. Yes, indeed.
Yes. It's a little bit on the scary side. So the first was They All Fall Down, and then the sequel was There Was a Crooked Man.
That's right.
They were both set locally, Cat.
They were, Imelda, yeah, sort of a fictional fishing village in South Wexford, which was, very clearly Kilmore Quay, where I grew up. And then sort of the other half of the second book was set in Marrakesh as well. And most of it was written in Wexford Library. I used to be in there every day for a couple of hours and availing of all the resources there, like my travel books and, all that. So like every book about Morocco and Marrakesh written in the library, I have read at this stage, so yeah.
I think I heard you say at a talk that you had a map of Marrakesh up in the house, so that
it was stuck to my desk. Stuck to my desk in front of me where I used to write every day. And I think if somebody sort of airlifted me into Marrakesh tomorrow, I know the place like the back of my hand, although I've never been there. But once the madness passes, maybe that'll be on the top of my list of places to visit.
But anyway, today we're going to talk about the books you love to read, Kat. So my first question for you is the book you most loved as a child.
Oh, 2 of them, Imelda. I have actually several of them here behind me, so I'll just stretch around. Can't not love Roald Dahl. Absolutely loved. Read all of his books several times. Enid Blyton, Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, all that kind of stuff. But these were the ones that stick in my mind, and I suppose now they're my son's copies. So going back now as a parent, reading those to my children and recreating the magic is kind of, and I think many families and many readers can identify with that sort of generation of Roald Dahl lovers, and then passing the magic on to their own children and in some cases their own grandchildren as well. So yeah, Roald Dahl sort of all the way. Then the other Irish writer that I'm sure lots of people will have remembered was Tom McCaughren. He brought out that trilogy of books in sort of the early 80s first. Wrote the 3 of them, was nominated for every award going, but I remember reading them probably like late 80s, and the books are told from the perspective of a skulk of foxes, and Tom McCaughren wrote them at a time where fox pelting was a really big industry in Ireland. So it was really to sort of appeal to people, that idea of reading and empathy and feeling empathy towards other characters, which in this case were the foxes who were being hunted for their fur. So that led on to many a hilarious moment when the hunt at Christmas time used to pass up at the back of our land, and I'd be out as a sort of, petulant teen shouting at them all and, leave the foxes alone kind of thing. So yeah, very varied reading background, come from a whole house of bookworms, Imelda, my parents, my siblings. So as soon as I finished reading my own books, I'd go and read all the rest of theirs as well, So first shortage of books in my house.
Move on to being a teenager then, as you said, the petulant teenager, Kat. What book then as a teenager do you think you influenced you most?
Oh, as an early teenager, I think for many reasons, The Diary of Anne Frank. I was probably just maybe coming into about 13 when I read that for the first time, and going from this, I suppose, idyllic little childhood where you grow up by the beach and, the rolling fields behind you and the love of family, and then to realize that, there was a bigger, badder world out there, and being the same age as the girl in this book and reading about her life. And as we all know, during the war, the atrocities and everything that she went through. So I think that was probably the first time I'd ever realized that a book can change the way a person looks at the world, because here I was, as I said, at 13 going, oh my God, like it's not all lollipops and sunshine and love and hugging parents and going to the beach all day, every day. So yeah, I think probably out of all the books
that's quite a realization.
Yeah, massive. And I suppose maybe that's where at such a young age I realized the power that a novel or a story, the written word, should I say, holds, and the idea that looking looking at the world through a different lens, in this case through somebody else's diary, that it just changes your perspective on the world in a sense, you know.
Yeah. And it's still such a valued book, that, and such a popular book, you know, and it is a kind of a rite of passage, I think, for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
I think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I do think so. And it's just, I suppose for many reasons, you know, but particularly again, just maybe seeing the world through a very different lens, and
Yeah.
beginning to understand maybe the world a little bit, that it's not all, you know, sunshine and roses sometimes, so to speak, that there's a big bad world out there in a sense.
Yeah. Oh dear, yeah. That made you laugh, Kat?
There's lots of them. Like, you couldn't have sort of grown up in the 80s and 90s and not have come across another diary, but in this case, The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole. I mean, that stuff was absolutely comical. Marian Keyes would be a huge one as well. Sort of, you know, she's got this amazing capacity to tackle really serious sort of events in somebody's lifetime, but do it through the lens of, you know, 1 minute you're actually howling laughing, and 2 seconds later you're crying. I mean, look at Rachel's Holiday, for example. You know, this idea of a woman, you know, there's some scenes in that where she's supposed to be in rehab in Wicklow, and it's laugh out loud funny, but the theme in that novel is a young woman struggling with addiction, you know, and her parents bring her, her family bring her home. So, but yeah, Marian Keyes, I think, is just, and she's my kind of go to if I'm having a crappy day and I just want to have a mug of tea and curl up on the couch and read a book that I know is going to be like a bit of a comfort blanket. I'll always pick up a Marian Keyes book, 100%. Yeah, you know, so then, yeah, Marian Keyes, probably Roddy Doyle, of course, The Commitment is there. Yeah, that's there somewhere as well, you know, and just that beautiful Dublin humour and Dublin dialect that Roddy Doyle does so very well as well, you know. So
and actually, it's funny when you said too about Marian, they both start to tackle. I mean, behind it all, there's quite serious issues in those books.
Yeah,
but they do it with such a light touch, and they make it look so effortless for us. It's obvious. I'm sure it's very hard.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, the effort of making a novel look effortless takes some effort, you know, that kind of way. So yeah, it's yeah, Marian Keyes in particular, she does it. So, and I mean, you know, look at any contemporary novel. I know we're kind of straying into the that area of elitism and snobbery in literature versus more commercial fiction, but I mean, like, commercial fiction is it's a powerful way to get a message out to people, as in sort of Marian Keyes' case, with particularly Rachel's Holiday. Again, several of Roddy Doyle's books, the same thing. Was it The Family? Was one? Was that the name of the novel that series was based upon? Yeah, I'm not sure the name of it. I think it was The Family. I certainly know there was a series made with that name. Charlo was the lead character.
Was it The Woman Who Walked Into Doors? Was that the first
one?
one?
Yes, thank you. That's the one. Yeah, that's the novel. Yeah.
Yeah. He turned a little bit more serious in that, but he still sort of had quite a light touch. You touched on something there too, Kat, which is the next question, which is the book that you don't want to admit to reading.
Oh,
kind of touched on something there now.
And it's sort of, again, you know, alluding to this argument, you know, sometimes, the literary versus commercial and blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of the times now, I'm kind of only speaking for myself and my opinion as a reader more so than a writer. But I think mostly we hear this argument from writers, so, you know, the literary versus the, you know, the chick lit or the women's fiction or only the crime novels or whatever it might be. But I think in that conversation, the writer always forgets about the reader, and without a reader, a writer is nothing. So I personally feel for every book that's written, there's a reader out there, and for every reader, they find their perfect book. And that doesn't matter if it's the Iliad or it's P.S. I Love You, or it's, you know, Hannibal Lecter's, Thomas Harris's novels. You know, there's a reader for every book, and there's a book for every reader. So I don't think anybody should ever be shamed into either pretending they've read a classic or pretending they haven't read something more contemporary if they loved it, you know. So yeah, I read all the books. I read all of them, you know. So yeah.
And to read widely is a great thing, isn't it?
Oh, it's brilliant. You look at, like, the last book I read was the girl with all the gifts, science fiction dystopian type thing. Like before that, I was reading Kevin Barry, Nightboat to Tangier. So it's I dip in and out of all sorts of fiction and non-fiction, and right across the different genres as well.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's fantastic.
Sorry,
And on that note, yeah.
Just wanted to say I've read that Girl with All the Gifts as well. That's actually a really good book, really, because it really keeps you guessing for a while what it's all about as well at the start. Because you have no idea really until about 100 pages into what's going on. As long as you don't
sort of the big crisis happens and they're out in the wild, and it's it's that idea when you jump into a book, the more sci-fi dystopian type thing. It's like you can suspend your disbelief so much more, and when as a reader you're reading a science fiction book, you kind of allow your mind to travel to that world and just get caught up with it. Anyway, whereas if it's something a little bit more realism or literary, whatever you want to call it, that margin to get away with things can be tightened sometimes. But I really enjoyed that Girl with All the Gifts. If you like that style of book, have a look at the last ones left alive. It's off in the sort of the west of Ireland.
Oh, I know what you're talking about now. All right, yeah, we were discussing that in the library here one day. We thought
Sarah Davis Goff, lads. How did her name just escape my head? Sorry, Sarah.
We were discussing in the library here one day. We thought it was based after the famine, but it's not. It's based after somewhere in the future. Like, it'd be very good as well. I'm just going back.
Really good. And for Stephen King, then where would you be without Stephen King? And another book I read as a teenager, actually, which probably scarred me for life, was Salem's Lot. Like 14, 15, reading those, and it's really, really creepy. Obviously, Misery is another one, but it's like whatever you're in the mood for it. There's a book there for everyone.
The sense of dread and misery is unreal. Like when you're reading that, it's just like, oh my god. Keeps you on.
And to go back to the movie, Kathy Bates is absolutely
brilliant.
Amazing in the movie as well, and it translated well onto the screen too. Look at all the books. Just read all the books and never ever be ashamed about reading anything,
Yeah. What is the book you most often give to others, Kat?
Oh, there's several of them. This one came out recently. Now the dust jacket is ruined on this because I've read the whole thing. It's The Art of the Glimpse, which is 100 short stories selected by Sinead Leeson. And Sinead Leeson has an art curator's eye when it comes to finding short stories that have sort of fallen to the wayside or newer, more contemporary Irish writers. And this is the book that I will be forevermore buying for people for gifts because it's beautiful. I mean, it has everybody from, the old staples like James Joyce and Beckett is in there. Jane Barlow is in there. Who else? Like sort of going back, sort of older, back. But then you've loads of our own Peter Murphy, obviously from Wexford, is in there as well. Louise Kennedy is in there. Donal Ryan is in there. Marian Keyes has a story in there as well. Right beside Benedict Kiley. Colin Tobin has a story in there as well called 1-1, and it was probably one of my top short stories. It was just astounding how he took the story about loss and grief in such a short space of time. Oh, it was astounding. Roddy Doyle, actually, I see he's in there as well. Mike McCormack, Nuala O'Connor, all the more contemporary Irish authors, as well as some of the sort of the older, well-loved ones as well. And that's just Sinead Leeson all over, really changing sort of that tea towel of Irish literature, so there's a hell of a lot more faces, male and female, to put on that tea towel now. Probably novel-wise, one that I love and I've read several times at this stage is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Duor. I can never pronounce his surname. Duor. He's an American guy, and the book is set in France and Germany just before the Nazi occupation during World War II, and it's one of the most beautifully written tales I've ever read. I actually gave my copy to my mother last week, sort of did a drive-by and threw it in over the wall to her, you know. But yeah, the language in it and the characterization, and oh, it's astounding. So All the Light We Cannot See. It's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read in my life, 100%. Yeah.
That's a great recommendation, yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. And you know, like, in spite of the time it's set in during World War II, there's something quite uplifting about it as well, that idea, which I suppose in a much lighter way applies to all of us now, that idea of resilience and sort of, you know, struggling through the storm to come out the other side as well. I mean, obviously there's no comparison between World War II and today, but you know, it's relative to, you know, that idea of resilience and holding firm for just a little while, you know, so we can come out the other side and have an absolute hoolie with any bit of luck.
Yeah, hopefully. What's the best book you've read in the last 12 months?
Oh, loads of books. I sort of, when I got my reading mojo back after the first lockdown, because it did, I think with a lot of people, such was the fright of everything going on, our concentration was gone, that anxiety was there for everybody, you know. So like, I couldn't concentrate on books, which to me is like cutting off my arm, you know. And even TV series, nothing was working for me. But then I finally got back in Colts and Whiteheads, the Nickel Boys. Quite a heavy read, but brilliant as well. Rob Doyle's Threshold. I know Peter, I think Peter interviewed Rob last year.
Yeah, they did an interview. All right. I think.
This is autofiction, as they call it. It's a character called Rob. Not for the faint of heart by any means. If you're easily shocked when it comes to sex and drugs and rock and roll, probably not one I'd be reading to my children, for example. But I just think Rob is an astounding brain, and he's an astounding writer, and I loved a couple of the scenes. Will be forever seared onto my brain. Yeah, loved. Again, I'm going with The Boys first. Nightboat to Tangier, Kevin Barry, and just the precision of that man's writing is crazy. And I was at an event back in the old days with Kevin, and he said when he's finished the first draft, so note to writers when it comes to, you know, rewriting and editing, when Kevin finished the first draft of this novel, it came in at about 120,000 words, which is a good, hefty novel size. When it was published, it was at 45,000 words. So that is, the editing and the like clearing away of the debris, and it's published by, I'm sure it's published by, but yeah, absolutely brilliant as well. But the one I'm most proud of is written by a very good friend of mine, Fiona Scarlett. Her launch is this Thursday, the 22nd of April. The novel, as you can see, is called Boys Don't Cry, and it's beautifully written. She writes vernacular and dialogue like Roddy Doyle, and she writes prose like Donal Ryan. And this is the story of two brothers called Joe and Finn, and they're living in a block of flats in Dublin, very affectionately called the Jacks. And it's a story about childhood cancer. It's a story about criminal gangs. It's a story about the class divide and how difficult it is to straddle those divides. But it's, I sobbed my way through it. But it's just so beautifully written. And Fiona is such a lovely human and such a lovely writer, and it's just so honestly done. But again, like you were saying earlier on, Imelda, three big kind of subjects to tackle, but done with such respect and such a lightness of touch to it as well. So yeah, I tell you, that book is one to watch out for. I think you're going to be hearing a lot of stuff about that sort of in the new year. I mean, there's quotes from Marian Keys there, Donal Ryan, Kit Duval, Louise O'Neill and Ruth Hogan, and that's just for a start, you know. So yeah, very amazing writer, so go get that one. I've a stack of books here. I could keep going like for another hour with books that I've read in the last year and loved, Imelda, but yeah, that's certainly one of them. What else? Oh, another. We'll move on with the women just very quickly because I'm conscious of the fact that I'm with boys. Doireann Ní Gríosa, A Ghost in the Throat. Very obvious that Doireann is coming from a poet's background because her use of language and just the way she looks at life and motherhood and womanhood, everything else is just
Beautiful.
outstanding.
Yeah.
The End of the World is a Cul-de-sac by Louise Kennedy. It's only been released in the last couple of weeks. It's an anthology, it's a collection, should I say, of 15 short stories. And Louise, she's a tonic for a start. So if any of you are on Twitter, go follow her. She's at Kennedy Lulu. But she's also an astounding writer. And again, a little bit like what I was saying about Colin Tobin's story earlier on, how she can capture just worlds in very short few pages, and you know, looking at lots of heavy hitting subjects. But again, there's a couple of laugh out loud moments in that book. There's a couple of moments that would actually reduce you to tears. And then Bernadine Evaristo's the controversial joint Booker winner from last year with Margaret Atwood. Really, really interesting book, all about sort of, again, womanhood. And yeah, look, at it, it's one of those books you just need to dive into and read, and it just, again, probably makes you look at the world through a slightly different lens by the time you get to the end of it. So there's a few little selections for you, Imelda, from the last 12 months.
Is there any book you're really looking forward to reading, Kat, that you haven't got your hands on yet?
Oh, now there's a question and a half. I'm very intrigued to read Sally Rooney's new one. It's coming out in the next few weeks. Well, I'm trying to think what else is coming out. There's so many books coming out in the next little while. It's kind of hard to keep up. Let me think. Actually, Lucy Caldwell's, the name of it now, Intimacies. It's another collection of short stories. Lucy Caldwell is in The Art of the Glimpse as well. An astonishing writer as well. And of course, on my own writers group, the Dooligans, is a group of us writers together. So I'm looking forward to book deals for them and their books coming out. A friend of mine just read her manuscript. She's just been signed to an agent. So I'm looking forward to her book getting out into the world. And of course, my own one. Fingers crossed, you know, I'm actually looking forward to reading the finished manuscript on that one, because it's like pulling teeth at the moment. So yeah, I'm sure I'm allowed to say my own one as well, you know, if the bloody thing is ever going to get finished. Yeah. Any recommendations, Imelda, do you have for books that you've got your
I liked the Durin na Grief. I had read that long lately, Ghost in the Throat. And I'm reading A Henning Mankell now, After the Fire, I think it's called. That doesn't sound right. But I quite like his. It's a sequel to one he did called Italian Shoes. And he did a lot of crime, but Italian Shoes and this one are slightly different. But he's an excellent writer, Henning Mankell. I really like his. The next question, we'll go back and talk a little bit about your own books, maybe after this question, Kat. But the one, and I think maybe you've kind of answered this question already, to be honest with you, because it's the book that changed the way you think.
Yeah, so lots of, I think probably most books.
Yeah.
I mean, like the whole idea of looking at the world through the lens of another person. I mean, that's what you're doing when you're reading a fiction novel, really, isn't it? You know, and you're empathizing with what, you know, like take Joe and Finn in Fiona's book, for example. You know, you're empathizing with two young boys that come from a certain background and the struggles they have. And, you know, it does, empathy changes how you look at the world and your tolerance and your understanding. But I'd say probably the most impactful book I ever read was The Diary of Anne Frank. Yeah, I think it's just, and I still clearly remember reading it at the time, and I really clearly remember how I felt at the time and how bereft I was to think that this big bad world existed. Here I was, like 12 years of age, in the, you know, touch wood, very gratefully, in this perfect idyllic childhood, growing up by the sea with loving parents and siblings that you squabble with constantly, but you know, if anybody else squabbled with them, you grow in behind them, you know. But yeah, I think it just really made me look at the world slightly different. And then of course Tom McCaughren, if my dad was still alive, I'm sure he'd tell you how mortified he'd be with me roaring at the people you know, at the hunt over Christmas, and they dressed up in all their finery, and I'm out on the doorstep shaking my fist at them, you know. Luckily I didn't get as far as Dublin with the can of red paint for the posh shops, but yeah, so they do, I think books always have an impact on the end. You know?
Yeah, and they can give you, as you say, they can just give you such an insight into a world that you kind of know nothing about.
Oh yeah, even on a lighter note, it's kind of, you dive into a place of employment in a book that you don't know what it's like to work in there, and all of a sudden you're getting all these little details, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Police procedurals, for example.
Yes, yeah.
We love how that whole story knots together, and we feel like we're kind of glimpsing behind the curtain a little bit to see what's going on in other people's worlds. So now there's a challenge for one of the three of you lads to write a book set in a library.
It may happen, yes, it may happen.
Never know. You'd never know. So yeah, but I suppose to answer your question again, yeah, definitely Diary of Anne Frank would be probably the most profound reaction I've ever had to a book.
That's been fantastic, Kat. Thanks so much for everything. But I just want to ask you before we finish up about your own book that's coming out, or what are you working on at the moment?
I am working on a few little projects at the moment, Imelda. I've sort of a writer friend of mine, a professor of creative writing in the University of Limerick, Sarah Moore Fitzgerald. She maintains that you should always have one on the go, one that you're editing, and one that you're thinking about. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. This third novel that I'm editing at the moment, it has nearly broken me more than once. It's quite an ambitious, another dark, twisty sort of, nothing light and fluffy about this one. 2 characters. I've had a lot of trouble with it. Finished it during lockdown, the first lockdown last March. And realized that when I went back to the page, it was literally me having a bit of an existential crisis on the page. There was nothing to do with the novel. So yeah, working on that, trying to unpick all the nonsense out of it and then construct that story again. So that's kind of that one. Hoping then to send it off to my agent, so hopefully sooner rather than later. Then I've started another one that's just a joy to write because it's first draft stuff, and you're only telling yourself the story as you're writing the first draft, so there's no pressure on that one. And then really over the last year as well, we've been doing a lot of work on the first 2 books because they were picked up by a production company to go into development for a TV series. So I was doing all the sort of paperwork. Yeah, it's exciting now. Look at in that world, we promising the sun, moon, and stars one moment, and then it's gone to the dust. So look at at the moment it seems to be happening, which is like super exciting. So I was working on that as well a lot, sort of all the stuff that goes with that, and like sometimes I wonder, go, Jesus, what am I doing? What am I doing to myself? Pulling my hair out, writing all this stuff all the time, but look at it's a compulsion, I suppose, in a sense, isn't it? And we can't as much as we don't read. Like it'd be like somebody saying to you, right, just stop reading. It's not going to happen, So keep your fingers crossed for me that this story will stop bullying me, and I will get to the end of it intact, and hopefully then I will be down as soon as the bloody library opens. I'll be in there sitting at that table looking for inspiration again, because as I said, that's where I wrote the second one. Yeah, I'll be first at the door to finish this bloody novel, Imelda.
Well, we'd be very delighted to welcome you back, Kat, and to see you coming in. And we'd be wishing you the best and egging you on to get it done. Have you a working title for it yet, or? It's
called Let's Play a Game for the moment, but sure, look at I've been lucky so far with the other 2 titles. They kept it, so yeah, I love that title and it ties into the story. But not that I'd be complaining if I'm like arguing with a publisher over the title of the book they're about to produce, but for now it's called Let's Play a Game, so let's hope it's kept that way.
Oh, brilliant. Well, we're delighted to. We really hope that'll go well for you, Kat, and it's been lovely talking to you. Thanks very much. And as I say, we just look forward now to welcoming you back in, and you can set up your little station to do your writing again with us.
Oh, it'll be a pleasure to come back and see you, because the library has always been so supportive. You're amazing, and we miss you, and we'll be very, very grateful when we see your lovely faces and the lovely Wexford Library open again, Imelda. So I'll be in to see you all as soon as possible.
Oh, thanks, Kat. Thanks so much. And we really look forward to that, and I really enjoyed the chat here this afternoon. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, Imelda.